Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome to Nightlight, everybody. So glad you could join me today. It's going to be an exciting show. I want to thank first, of course, Ken Quiethawk for his intro. Please search him out on the internet. He's a native storyteller, and his stories are amazing. You will learn something about our culture and cosmology and a new way of preserving history, which has been utilized for thousands of years, but not so much now. We should reinstate it, I think. My guest tonight is Michael Feeley. He's written a book called Alchemy of the Gods, and in this book, Michael, as a trained police investigator, reveals to you that humans are not from Earth, but from another constellation entirely. He's also uncovered the pyramids and other mysterious monoliths around the world carry an encrypted message, and that there are higher communications held within the likes of the Nazca lines, crop circles, hieroglyphic language, and the Moai heads of Easter Island. Michael makes astounding revelations about the mystery of the elongated skulls of Stonehenge, Egypt, Russia, Peru, and Malta, with a new interpretation of their meaning and formation, plus much, much more. Just who were these ancient gods, worshipped and idolized and documented by our ancient ancestors? Are they extraterrestrial beings from other far-off worlds, or are they simply the elder race of man paying their root races a return visit, giving them the tools for inner transformation? Alchemy of the Gods is indeed a book sent from the stars. Experts in the field have commented, your level of research is astounding. That's Anthony Peake, best-selling author. Alchemy of the Gods is a fascinating and compelling read. Michael's multidisciplinary research leaves no stone unturned as he investigates the origins of our species. A must-read for those seeking the truth for who we are. That's Mary Rodwell, international speaker, researcher, and Eastern founder. And for more information, you can visit Michael's website at michael-feeley.com. Please wait till after the show to visit, though, because listening to him is an adventure in itself. He's a former UK police officer and now an esoteric author, symbologist, and revealer of hidden and suppressed knowledge, often referred to as the real DNA Da Vinci Code. So it is my honor to welcome Michael to the show. Welcome, Michael.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Well, it's very exciting to have you here because your book is definitely unique, definitely one that questions a great deal, but with great validity because of the research that you put into it. And I think that coming from the background that you come from gives you tools that most historians don't have, and a different slant on understanding the reality and what it means. So you want to give us a little feedback on your background and how it led you into finding this code that you have utilized.
No, absolutely, thank you. Yes, my previous sort of life was in law enforcement for 17 years of a 30-year career. And 17 years into that career, strange things began to happen to me to such an extent that my life turned 360 degrees and I was no longer the same person. So I either went back to something I no longer resonated with, or I continued forward to look into the kinds of adventures that I was being subjected to and becoming an experiencer of. And at the beginning, I sort of made the decision, shall I follow the same tracks as everyone else and just repeat what everybody else is saying? Or do I look for some different and new tracks, which is where I was kind of being guided to go anyway. And I decided to look into new and different tracks and formulate a different perception of what the ancients were telling us, because it had always been a fascination in any case. And for 17 years prior to that, I'd been finding fingerprints at the scenes of crime. But even though this wasn't a crime, there were still fingerprints being left at the scene. And that scene, for me, was the ancient world. It was the pyramids, it was the Stonehenge, it was the Heads of Easter Island, it was the world religions that were hiding secrets within their scriptures. It was sort of races and monoliths and monuments beyond planet Earth that were connected mathematically and provably mathematically to the monuments on Earth. So that really was what happened. I sort of had an investigative mind, evidence-gathering mind, and when all these strange things began to happen to me, which brought me into this kind of arena by, I guess, a predeterminism, but certainly from this conscious viewpoint, it was kind of by force. And having been brought into this arena, then I decided to make new tracks and unique tracks and look into the world with new eyes.
Well, I was most fascinated by the code that you found, because it's something that hasn't been talked to or looked into, and yet it's obviously there. How did you develop that? I mean my feeling is that you have been divinely inspired in directions, kind of like in spite of yourself, you've been going, led in these directions, and this code with the numbers fascinated me.
No, absolutely. When you look at the actual design and the creation of the universe, which I've done, then you can only have one conclusion, that it's a design. And that design is largely mathematical in nature. So therefore, a lot of the monuments and the monoliths, and even the Bible and different ancient holy scriptures, contain number sequences. They contain hidden secrets within numbers, within paraphrases, within symbols, within codes, all of these different things. And I found that the original Bible was actually the Giza Plateau. So everything that you see in the Christian Bible today, you can find originally in Giza, largely the Great Pyramid. And just one example of that is if you look at the height of the pyramid, which is 481 feet, and by what is known as digital summation, if you take the individual numbers of 481, it equals 13. 481 divided by 13 equals 37, which is the numerical value of Christ. When you mirror that number, it becomes 73, which is the numerical value of Jesus. So 73 and 37, Jesus Christ. If you times those two numbers, it equals 2,701, which is the numerical value of Genesis 1:1. Which is, God, in the beginning God made the heavens and the earth, and so on and so on. And these ancient monuments are absolutely littered with such numerology. If you look at the diameters of the Sphinx of Egypt, you get 316,800. Now that is the perimeter of New Jerusalem, biblically, which is really bringing heaven to earth. Now when I times those numbers, I got 144, which is God as man, or man as God. And then you look into the 144,000 K-stones, you then look into the number 9, then you look into the number 153, which relates to basically the fingerprints of the Creator. And as I say, it's absolutely littered with such numerology that even people now say to me, I keep seeing 555, or I keep seeing 111 or 222. What does it mean? Well, 222, really, if you get the number of Christ, 37, and you times it by the number of man, 6, you get 222. So it's really the Christ within. And that's why people are seeing 222 and so on and so on. So in a universe where mathematics is the primary language, then it's hardly surprising that a lot of these monuments that are connected to the creative energy have all of these numerics that relate back to sort of the holy divine mind.
Yeah, I sat there at first thinking, what is he saying? And then I realized what you were doing, and it made perfect sense. And I've often wondered why the ancients hadn't left us messages about how to build the pyramids or what the Morai were for. And, it makes complete sense that these structures are the messages that our ancients left us, and we haven't been curious enough, wise enough to decipher the messages that were left, because, thousands and thousands of years. You have to say in thousands of years, what is humanity going to be able to understand about this? And you leave them a message assuming that they are going to be able to decipher it. And, for the last 2,000 years, we haven't been deciphering much. So, it to me is saying, okay, we have all these messages that are scattered all over the globe and the moon and Mars and beyond, and now it's sort of like, let's take a look at them, let's see what they can tell us, and let's go deeper into our own consciousness to see if there's a DNA memory that can be reawakened. And, that to me is phenomenal, that you have come at it from this direction, and that it's so explicit, that it's so absolute, that you can't deny it. You have to just look at it and say, wow, it's been there all along, and we didn't pay attention to it.
It certainly has, and I've dated using Egyptian star codes, which were then taken by the Hebrews to create the Hebrew calendar, the ingredients of which they hid in the Dead Sea Scrolls that were hidden by the Knights Templar in Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, which I've also found. I've dated the Great Pyramid at 73,440 years of age. So we are looking at messages that have been around for a long, long, long time for us to find. And it's almost like a time capsule of knowledge, whereas in the modern day, we tend to have this tube that we put in the ground for future generations to find. But the time capsule of knowledge in the ancient past was Stonehenge, the pyramids, the heads of Easter Island. All of these ancient sites were the time capsule of knowledge that was, should we say, timed to be re-emerged now. And when you look at the Egyptian star codes, it talks about 360-year cycles, which is where the Hebrew calendar originates from. And they speak specifically about the 17th 360-year cycle. Now, the 17th 360-year cycle is when this ancient knowledge was set to re-emerge. The 17th 360-year cycle is now. So if you can imagine how privileged we are to be part of a generation that was chosen to be in receipt of the return of this knowledge, the second coming of the Christ, because we have been chosen as a generation as the keepers of this knowledge. So when archaeologists are looking into the ground, digging in the ground deep for these answers, they're not going to find them in the ground, because that's not where they are. They are in stone. And even when you look at the word stone, it means father and son. When you look at the word son in Hebrew, it is ben or bena, which means to build. Now, the Father is the knowledge of the mind. The Heavenly Father is the knowledge of heaven, the knowledge of the universe. So our Father who art in heaven, in other words, our knowledge originates in the heavens. So when you look at the word stone, father and son, it means that it is built with knowledge. But also the word son in Latin comes from sonic or resonate or resonance. So it means to build with sound. So when you look at all the ancient monuments, they are sound amplifiers. Now I took a group a little over a year ago to the inner circle of Stonehenge, and one of our group made the stones reverberate and sing. And you are looking at sound chambers. So when you look at the word stone, and they're cut into squares because it is the square of truth, you are really looking at an ancient way of creating with sound, creating with divine mind. And these are all the kinds of messages that they're leaving us. And it doesn't stop there. The messages are pretty endless. You know, it's just a case of having to sit down, having to work them out, and just acknowledging and put your mind put your mind into the mind of the mystics who knew things and understood things in a unique way. And when you do that, and when you go into the mind of the mystics, you too began to speak their language. And when you speak their language, you then understand their language.
Well, you know, you speak of elders and mystics and, you know, ancients from the past, coming forward in time. You're talking, you know, I've talked about, you know, these wise masters, teachers that do tap into a generation every now and then to give messages. Who are these people? Are they, you know, really masters from the future, or are they extraterrestrials? Where are these people coming from?
Well, technically, we're all from different places in the universe, so none of us are really, should we say, aboriginal to Earth. Our DNA is programmed elsewhere. Our body's created by the explosion of a star in the Orion Nebula. So we just settled here. This is just where we are. So we technically, our essence is from elsewhere anyway. But a long time ago, there was a race of advanced humans called the Sons of God. And obviously, biblically, they shorten that to the Son of God. But it's the Sons of God who had the elongated skulls. And the elongated skulls basically tell us that they had a fully developed brain center, which gave them additional and advanced spiritual capabilities and abilities. And they were able to use the forces of nature to work for them. So these monuments were not built by Hebrew slaves. They were built by the manipulation of the forces of nature. They lived consciously in the seventh plane of existence, which is the God plane, which is the divine plane. And as a result of that, they had direct contact with the creative force. So these are the kinds of people that we had a long time ago with the elongated skulls. And the reason that we find elongated skulls all over the world at sacred sites is because they spread out over the world. And everywhere that they docked and disembarked from their boats, they created these monuments and monoliths to insulate their advanced technology and to also leave coded messages as a legacy, as a silent witness of the knowledge and the wisdom that that once reigned the world. Now, when you look at the word Egypt, Egypt is not an Egyptian name. The word Kehemet is really Egypt. Now, when you look at the word Kehemet, it means knowledge and truth. So the K is knowledge and the E-M-E-T is truth. Now, when you look at how the Hebrews spell Emet, it is small e, a capital M, small e, small t. The M stands for Mem, which is water. It is Moses. It is Moses drawn from the water who was born in Egypt, because Moses is centered within the word Kehemet. So all of these biblical, ancient Egyptian, Sumerian, Babylonian, Moai, all of these different civilizations were the same people spread across the world. And what I've proven is that they were singing from the same hymn sheet, literally. They were talking about the same things. Mathematically, they were giving the precise locations of each other's monuments. And mathematically, in longitude and latitude coordinates, you have the likes of the face on Mars, which tells you precisely how to find Stonehenge. You have the Giza Plateau that tells you how to find the pyramid, the five-sided pyramid on Sidonian City on Mars, and so on and so on. When you look at the lunar abaca on the moon, on the Ocean of Storms, and you look at the coordinates of where the 6 Egyptian obelisks are, when I've taken the coordinates of them and put it on Earth, it is Egypt.
Wow. So so these people who come in, do they come in at the end of every root race? Is this a cycle that's going on, or is this unique to our time frame and to our cycle?
Well, what has happened, and again, the Great Pyramid is a calendar for this, is when the Bible talks about Adam and Eden, it's really talking about the fall of man as part of the sixth civilization. So this is now the sixth civilization, but it also talks about a seventh civilization, who are the torchbearers, who are the carriers of knowledge. So when you see the likes of the Olympic flame, when you see the likes of the torch of the Statue of Liberty in New York, that is the torchbearers, the knowledge bearers of Earth, the seventh civilization, who are going to take over from the sixth civilization, who are fallen. So when you look at Adam, it is Aleph Dam, which is the blood of the ox, which is all about sacrifice. When we came from a celestial place and we came through the womb into a terrestrial place, the altar we sacrificed because we relinquished that for this. So we came here and we fell. And that really is the biblical Adam, and that's the metaphor that it was talking about, the fall of man. So that is the womb, that is the altar, that is the holy grail that we must come through to come into this world. So the Garden of Eden, which means paradise, is the body. Now, when you see a lot of ancient tools to transmit this secret information, such as tarot cards, such as dominoes, such as dice, and I'll just take the dice as an example. When you get a dice, it has 6 faces, and there's obviously 6 sets of numbers, 1 to 6. Each opposite number equals 7. So number 7 is an invisible factor, which is really the key to the third dimensional world. But when you look at cipher, which is really a secret language where you replace letters for letters, or letters for numbers, or letters for symbols, each dice, when you add up the words 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, it equals 103. So when you have 2 dice, that is 206, which is the amount of bones in the human body. So paradise is a paradise. It is talking about the body as being Eden, the garden. And when, again talking biblically, when the virgin in mystic terms is someone who has cleared their soul of earthly dross in order to allow the divine seed to come in. Now the divine seed comes into the stable. Now what is meant by stable is planet Earth, which is basically an animalistic home, and it is an animalistic nature, which is the human race. So this divine seed has to come into the stable, the animalistic world, and it has to elevate itself and reconnect to its divine self through certain practices, through certain rituals, through certain initiations. And it also uses the energy of the zodiac. So the reason that we are told that Christ was born in a stable in December is because that is the energy of Capricorn, which is the goat. So the goat is really symbolic of the divine child. That's why we call children kids, because of the goat. So we have the goat. Now, when you look at the battles between Christ and Satan, you realize that Satan is the law of matter, which is the body, which is money, which is the lust for power, which is materialistic things. That is Satan, the law of matter. God and Christ is the law of spirit. Now, divinity, our divine self, rules the body. Therefore, it is above the laws of matter. And this is really the conflict between Satan and Christ. It is the divine self versus the material self. And which one will we elevate? So all of these sacred scriptures, per se, are telling us really about how to ascend, how to advance, but it's put in such a way that the information doesn't come cheaply. You have to work at it. You have to work it out. You have to sit there and work out the puzzle. Because when you do, then you realize what it is really saying, and that is the self, the divine self, and how to elevate and ascend your divine self.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, and when you do look about the stories and the Bible, for instance, I mean, your code is there, but we are the universe. It is telling us about ourselves, not about other people or other situations. It's telling about our journey in ascension and embracing the spiritual realms, the higher consciousness, and it makes great sense because I've often wondered, the Bible is a wonderful book, but what's its purpose? And then when you take your interpretation and put it into the Bible, it makes far more sense. We all struggle with the material world in many ways, and the material world in many ways holds us back from a spiritual understanding and application of the love and the compassion that Spirit has. And a lot of the parables apply to inner struggles as opposed to outer struggles. They're symbolic of things that we as spirits are transitioning and embracing and getting understanding from as we grow and evolve and reach out and embrace our fellow man. Now, once and when you look at organized religion is apparently, all of them are built on the purpose of holding us in ignorance as opposed to leading us into wisdom.
That is correct, and that is one of many reasons that this kind of divine wisdom has been hidden, so that the masses, the vulgar, the unsophisticated, the uninitiated never hear the truth. So when unity divides, and the word divinity means to divide, so to separate into different parts, which is ourself. When unity divides, we have what we understand to be duality. We have to have duality in order to have a perception, to have a reality, to have an understanding, and to have a comparable. So when the creative force separated, because it was everything and nothing simultaneously, it created duality. Now with duality, you have to have comparable halves. What I mean by that is one is manifest and one is unmanifest. And that is the only way that you can have that. So at the moment, let's just take this physical incarnation. At the moment, life is manifest and death is unmanifest. At some point, death will become manifest and life will become unmanifest. And then at some point again, they will swap places and life will become manifest again, which is reincarnation. Now, we see this in the laws of nature every year. When we just look at a tree, when the leaves die, when the leaves grow, when the leaves die, when the leaves grow, it is reincarnation. And therefore, because we are divinity, we are divided into separate parts, which is fragments of the one, fragments of unity, then we are all divine. We all have divine rights, and no system should ever be able to take that away from us, because we are all divinity, divinity per se. But we do live in a system that tries to keep us going further and further and further into matter, with daily struggles, with debts, with all of this system, because the further you take people into matter, the further you take them into satanic consciousness, the further you take them into just an absolute reality that bears no resemblance to real reality, because people just see they are born, they work, they pay their tax, they die, and that is the end. And that is really what religions are telling people. That is really what the system is telling people, because it is taking them further and further and further into matter, so that they can never really understand what they truly are. And when people understand that they're divine, when people understand that they don't need to worry about Satan and the law of matter, because we are more than just matter. We are many, many different compositive parts. And when you realize that, nothing can hold you down, nothing can hold you back.
Well, I think that's one of the big messages for the time. I mean, and as especially from the Emerald Tablets, as above, so below, as there's a universe out there, there's a universe within us that mirrors it, and it's something that so many people just don't get, and I think that that's a great deal of it has to do with major religions telling us, no, there are those that are above you, and that those that will rule you and that will make choices for you and that you can appeal to, and they will change your life course or whatever. And the reality is that we have the power to do that. I mean, in the physical, sometimes hard, sometimes difficult to work at, but definitely there. But the messages appear to be all over the place. And I was fascinated, especially when you mentioned the Nazca lines. How are they giving us insight into? I know that some of them are Mandela type forms that have great meaning. I've done Mandela, so I understand the meaning in those. But how do the Nazca lines apply to this?
Well, it's the same with any advanced symbolic language, which is what it really is. It's the same as crop circles, which contain diatonic ratios, which are basically sound waves of information. So if you imagine a double sound wave, and you imagine that something has actually impregnated letters and words inside those sound waves to be extracted into a language of understanding, that is the same with the Nazca lines. When you look at the likes of hieroglyphs, when you touch a hieroglyph, you will get a download. When we had in the UK, we had an incident in the 1980s called Rendlesham Forest, and it was where there's an American Air Force base in the UK, and on 2 nights running, they were visited by a craft, which obviously everyone denied, because they always do. But when one of the American airmen touched some kind of symbolic language on the spaceship on the craft, he had an automatic binary code download, which in the 1980s binary code was not really understood. Now, part of that message was evaluation of humanity. So these things are advanced languages. They're not just nice things to look at, and Nazca's the same, crop circles are the same, hieroglyphs are the same, cuneiform is the same. All of these, often even the likes of the Hebrew alphabet, which is very, very picturesque as well. It's all advanced symbolic language. So that is what it is conveying. It is conveying a message. And again, some people can see that message. Some people can get downloads of that message, and other people wouldn't see anything other than pretty pictures. But that is the beauty really of advanced symbolic language, because it only penetrates at the level that you're ready to receive.
I know the airmen kept that binary code secret. The authorities didn't ask to see his notebook, so he was able to preserve it. And I think it was decades later that someone says that's binary code and it can be interpreted. So that was fascinating. That was really fascinating. I had him on the show, and he was a fascinating man to talk to. So you talk about the pyramids being, they aren't just big structures. They certainly weren't meant to be tombs. So what was the purpose of them, according to this?
Well, the same with anything. There are several purposes. One of them is really a silent witness, a legacy to the knowledge and the wisdom that once ruled Earth. And it's also basically a database of advanced knowledge with advanced technology that's hidden inside certain chambers, which, if you wish to get to, you have to have the correct word said at the correct tone at the correct time. And then when you do that, you will see that certain stones move, and they give you access to underground chambers which contain lots and lots of information about the history of humanity, about star travel, about how they were visited by star travelers, how they visited the stars themselves, how they did that with liquid light. So one of the purposes really is a legacy of advanced knowledge to aid the future generations of humanity, which have been basically taken over by what they describe as the sons of men. Now, the sons of men are the ones who are still having power now. You know, the lust for power, the lust for greed, the lust for money, the lust for control. That is the sons of men, and they are the ones who rule now. But what this is saying is at some point that will change. But this kind of information is encrypted within the likes of the Great Pyramid, which is really the epicenter of all the other monuments on the planet. Another reason for them is they tell us of the God mind. So when you look at when you put an overlay of a human head over the Great Pyramid, which I've done facing north, you will see that the likes of the Queen's Chamber and the likes of the King's Chamber correlate to the pituitary and the pineal gland, which are the seat of consciousness. So it is telling us about the Father, the mind that connects to the Heavenly Father. So our Father who art in heaven, which is really talking about heavenly universal knowledge that has been anchored and brought down into the third dimensional world. So it's really using matter to anchor down divine knowledge on earth as it is in heaven. And that's what they were doing. They were technically walking gods, or the walking God man, who were in connection to the creative force. So that was another reason for them. And then you also have the likes of teleportation. So that there were portals to other monuments, there were portals to other planets, and vice versa. They were an epicenter of the amplification of the planet's energy, which they were able to connect to other, shall we say, planetary grids and other monuments on Earth to act as a gigantic energy grid. But it was all sort of kept quiet. It was all shut down when the sons of God began to lose their power. So we had a spiritually advanced race which was replaced by a materialistic race who, yes, technologically we are becoming more and more advanced, but spiritually we are not. And that really is the difference. So there's many different reasons for these monuments. Now when you look at the creator, the unity, the creative force, when it recognizes itself in the third dimension, it manifests as a triangle. Now the triangle is 1 becomes 3, 3 becomes 1, which is the Trinity. Now when you get the triangle and you make it into a third dimensional shape, it becomes the pyramid. So the pyramid is the 4 faces of God. Now when you, again, as I mentioned about stone meaning father and son and built with wisdom and sound, when you look at the biblical, the cornerstone usually always faced northeast. And the reason it faced northeast is because it is then in between dark and light. And every one of us each day has the choice. And then you can go back into binary code, because binary code really is 2 choices. Do we or don't we? Yes, no, left, right, good over evil. That is binary code. That is binary choice. So you know, you can get the Masonic checkered flooring, or you can get the cornerstone that the builders rejected, which is a stone that faces between north and east, between dark and light. We have this wonderful library, this wonderful catalogue of advanced knowledge that millions of people each year go and visit, but they have not one single iota of a clue as to what it's telling them, because they are told that it's just a burial for a pharaoh, which it isn't.
I know. No. This always bothered me, but you know, and the reality that according to their dating process, the Egyptians that built it used copper tools, which it couldn't possibly have been, and yet that's what they teach in school, and a bit disturbing for sure. You mentioned the Trinity. The Trinity, according to you, is what?
The Trinity is the cause and effect of universal creation. So what you have is a cause, and that cause will create an effect, and that effect is duality. So the further and further you get away from the original cause, you then are only able to see the effects, which then becomes an absolute reality, which is a dualistic reality. The Trinity really is the universal cause and effect. When you start looking at the triangle, which is a sacred shape, you then start looking at the recognizer, the recognition, and the recognized, which is really the creative force recognizes itself within third-dimensional creation. Now, when that creative force goes beyond dimensions, goes beyond time and space, it manifests as the number 4, which then takes us into the square of truth, which is why many of the stones of the likes of the Great Pyramid were square cubes, because it is the square of truth. So we have geometry, when we look at the likes of the Seal of Solomon, which is a harmonic key to the Great Pyramid, which then later became the Star of David. When you look at Christ as the numbers 37 and 73, when you get two triangles of 37 dots in the hexagon and 73 dots in the hexagram, you get the Star of David, which is really the portal of worlds and all kinds of things. So geometry is intrinsic in creation, and there's always geometry within geometry, which is mathematics, which is sonics, which is just a wonderful, should we say, spider's web of creation. And these monoliths and monuments, these ancient scriptures are pertaining to that, but they're hiding that. And we have this wonderful database of knowledge of who we are, our complete blueprint, which has been encrypted within these, tetrahedrons in the desert.
Yeah, I think that's one of the important things for all humans to acknowledge or to understand. Our DNA actually, if taken back to the original DNA, because it has mutated over time, it turns out to be twice as old as the Earth that we're on. So obviously we came from somewhere else. And that's something that humanity, I think they think that we are just isolated here on this one planet, and humanity is so much more than that. There's, the antiquity that is within our DNA goes back to twice as old as the Earth. And for somebody to grasp that, it's like, if it's twice as old as the Earth, where did we come from? And why are we here? I mean, there's got to be a purpose that our spirits are incarnating on this planet at this time in this form. And are we here to learn to transcend the humanity, the physical? Are we here to expand consciousness in a different way or a different vibrancy? Why are our spirits on this planet at this time?
Okay. Well, how we are at this moment in time is our chosen expression. So there's all of these different dimensions, all of these different star systems, and this is the chosen expression for us. When you look at some of these secret, concealed tablets inside the likes of the Great Pyramid, they speak of Earth almost being a prison. And they speak of certain individuals of other races having to come here to serve a sentence of sort. And in order to, should we say, please the parole board and escape the prison, you have to spiritually advance. Not only do you have to spiritually advance, you also have to help others to spiritually advance while you're here. So the train of thought there is that this is the kind of prison that we must, should we say, graduate from. And the way in which we graduate is by personal advancement. So all of these initiations, in the past, initiations were done in the secret halls of the temples. These days, initiation is done in the trials and tribulations and the challenges of life. When I look back at certain crossroads of my life and I look at the decisions that I've made, and I've looked at the format of ancient initiations, they are comparable. And a lot of people are being initiated in the crossroad decisions of their life. That is their modern day initiation. Initiation is really what it boils down to, is expanding your body's capability, and that is your nerve endings and different things, your body's capability to accept and receive higher frequency of divine wisdom and knowledge. And until you expand your body to accept that greater influx, you will not receive that greater influx. If you just imagine that you're now just about to plug in, a TV or something else, and the electrical wire is faulty and the wires are not connected, then you're going to blow the circuit. But that's what will happen to the body if you are not ready for these higher frequencies. And many people have died during ancient initiations because they were not ready for the higher influx of energy. So really, we are here to learn, we are here to advance, we are here to graduate, and we are here to escape the prison. And that really is a multifold answer, but in reality it is a planet of initiation that gives us the opportunity, and it gives us some kind of resistance to grow and get stronger. If I was to go to a weightlifting gym, I advance my muscles, I make my muscles stronger by having some kind of weight as a resistance. When we come on this planet, we have the dark side of the duality that gives us that resistance, that gives us that means of creating strength, inner strength. And there's so much knowledge and everything that has been left for us. There's books in stone form, in stone oracle form, all over the planet, where we can just go to the library and we can download that information. So all the tools are here for us to do that. First of all, we need to realize that there are tools, that there are libraries, why we're here, who we are. Now, when you look at the biblical, the sons of God and the daughters of men, that comes back from a time where these elongated, advanced spiritual humans realized that the sons of men were going to take over the planetary power, and in order to create a genetic line for them to incarnate during future generations, they procreated with the daughters of men. Now, when one of these sons of God reincarnate into this third dimensional world, they basically have to develop again. They have to start again. So when some of your viewers will relate to this, when you feel like you're trapped in your body, you feel like you don't resonate with the planet, you feel like you don't belong here, you feel like you are socially inept, you feel like you are a leper of kind because you have different interests to most of your social network, and that is because you are feeling what is true. You have come back here, you have reincarnated here to help humanity. Now, a lot of extraterrestrial races, and you'll not get many people within the UFO community say this, but many extraterrestrial races are advanced spiritual humans who have basically graduated, but they have come back to help us.
I'll buy that. That makes great sense. I know that often I have said to people that Earth is quarantined from the rest of the universe because we aren't ready, and that we are far too violent to be a part of a divine and a divine organization of any sort, not even organization. And I think that where most people trip up with this is that when you say divine, they think religious, and it's not religious, it's divine. There's a difference. And religions have different ways of defining divine and then utilizing that definition to control people, and divine doesn't control. So, and that's just my opinion.
No, and it's a valid one. As I say, divine means divide, and divide means to separate into different parts. So when, should we say the original fire began to shoot off embers, in other words, it divided into separate parts, and we are those separate parts. So we are all divine by definition. When you say to somebody, what is divinity? They will say, oh, it's a saint, it's Jesus. It means to divide, which means to separate from the one. And we are all divine by that means.
Yeah, you've got an amazing message here. I would imagine that there are people out there now who are ready to hear your explanation, because you would have been burned at the stake quite a while ago. So, good thing you waited to come back now. The other thing that fascinated me was Atlantis and Lemuria. You go in depth into the fact that they are in the head, not in the physical. Want to explain that?
Yeah, it is my belief based on when I first started researching, getting downloads and started to get ideas and answers and questions and answers coming to my head at the same time. I began to realize that all of these ancient civilizations that I originally believed were separate entities were not. They were all the same thing, the same with all the world religions. It's really the same thing. It's the same tree, but it has multiple branches. So when I started looking into Atlantis and Lemuria, a lot of my information sometimes has very few friends, because it really does go against, it goes against the mainstream, it goes against the New Age, it goes against UFO community, it goes against truth groups. So it really is a very small sort of platform that I'm isolated within. But when you actually look at Atlantis and you start looking at it with some kind of critical thought, then you start to realize that Atlantis and Lemuria is a state of mind, not a place. And I'm not suggesting for one moment that there aren't underground cities. Of course there are. The geography of the world and the demographics of the world has changed. But Atlantis and Lemuria is a state of mind. Now, when you look at the human spine, which is really the Christian fish, because fish and spine in Egyptian is Semek, it's the same word. The spine is the highway to your Golgotha, to your skull, to your place of consciousness. And there are 33 vertebrae of the spine. That is why the number 33 is highly significant throughout the mystic world. But there are 33 vertebrae. The final and 33rd vertebrae of the human spine is medically called Atlas. Now, Atlantis means the island of Atlas. So what you are talking about is the island that is at the top of the spine, which is Golgotha, the place of skulls, which is the mind. So when you look at the pineal gland, you will see that it is surrounded by cerebrospinal fluid. So in other words, it is an island. Now, Plato described Atlantis as the island that ruled 7 islands. What he's talking about is the pineal gland, which is an island, which is the master gland, and it rules the 7 chakras. What we have is a state of mind, not a place. Now, when you look at the reactivation of the likes of Atlantean crystals, between the pineal gland and the pituitary gland in the human brain, there is a crystalline region called the crystal palace. That is the crystal of Atlantis and Lemuria. Now, when you look at Lemuria, the word mu goes all the way back to water and the serpent. It also states in documentation that there were snake men, serpent people walking around on the land of Lemuria. So what does that really mean? It means that the advanced spiritual races went through some kind of metamorphosis, because a snake goes through a metamorphosis when it sheds its skin, etc. And that is seen as a rebirth, a new life. So Lemuria, the walking snake people, is talking about the metamorphosis within, and Atlantis is a state of mind, not a place. Now, when you talk about the power of the mind and how the ancients were trying to transit that information to us, when you go to the edge of Easter Island, which has been mentioned several times, why is it that you can only ever see the heads of Easter Island, the statues? Because they were telling us to not concentrate on a body of senses, but instead to concentrate on a divine mind. That is why you can only see the heads in Easter Island. When you look at the cross, the Christian cross, or the Ankh of Egypt, the cross is the body, man or woman with their arms outstretched. Now, when you look at the region on the cross between the horizontal bar and the top of the cross, or in human body terms, from the shoulders to the top of the head, that is the fourth way. That is Father who art in heaven. So when you look at the Egyptian Ankh, you see the person and you see a head which is empty. The empty head is basically the creative void, the perfect enlightenment. So when you have an empty mind, you are able to accept and receive this ancient advanced knowledge. Now, in the biblical story of the Nativity play, when they went to the inn and the inn was full, it represents a mind that is full, that is not able to take and absorb this advanced divine knowledge. It is all there for us to work out, but Atlantis really is a state of mind. It is a higher state of mind, not a place.
Oh, I love it. That's a fabulous way to explain it. In your book, you mentioned tons of different ancient sites, and the one that and I may have missed it. I think you spoke briefly of Göbekli Tepe. Is that another one of these sites that was buried in our consciousness until it was time for us to find that wisdom and knowledge within?
They all are, and again, they all speak of the same thing in different ways. It's the same as, in the East, someone may say crimson, in the West, someone may say red, but nevertheless, they're describing the same thing in different ways. And Göbekli Tepe, which is really the pot belly, the belly, which is, again, the area of the navel, which is important because it's the center of divine energy and earth energy where it meets around the navel. So that, again, they are telling you the same thing. And some of the carvings on the stones of Göbekli Tepe, like the vulture, like the scorpion, is what you find in other ancient sites. The vulture, really, one vulture represents the pineal gland, 3 vultures represents the belt of Orion. Now, when I mentioned Christ having a numerical value of 37, in the Orion Nebula, just to the left as you look at the main Orion, there is a cluster of stars called the 37 cluster, because it gives you the shape of the 37. So we have this earthly worldwide correlation to Orion and Orion's belt and different things, but they're all telling us the same thing in different ways. Quetzalcoatl, what is Quetzalcoatl? Well, it's the Kukulkan, which is basically the serpent to the base of the spine, which is talking about the power of the mother, which is Kundalini. That then takes you into Mother Mary, which is the Kundalini, which is lifted by the aisles, by the Anointed One, that takes you through the chakras of the body, up Jacob's ladder, which is the spine, into the mind, where by the pineal gland you have a region called the vault. Now, when you look at the meaning of a vault, it is a tomb, it is a grave. So this Christ isle, the Anointed One, the spinal fluid that is pushed up by the Mother Mary, and Joseph just means to increase. So this is pushed up through the solar plexus, the sun energy, into the mind, into the vault, into the tomb. So when you awaken this serpent power within us, then you basically have Easter and the resurrection of Christ within your own mind, within Golgotha. Now, the only energy that can enter through the pillars of Hercules, which is the anterior pillars of the brain, is an energy called the 4 Amen. Foramen, 4 Amen, forever and ever Amen. And the word Amen relates to the number 33. So we are talking, and all of these terms, all of these things can actually be confirmed in Gray's Medical Dictionary, because they recognise this and named all this as well. So it is all there for us to find. It is all there to piece together. But every single ancient site, every single religious scripture of any of the religious books is talking about the ascension of self, the divine self, and how to ascend that divine self out of the grips of the laws of matter.
Terribly, terribly profound. I think one of the parts of your book that I just that I was amazed by, you speak of the Great Flood. Well, you speak of, the Bible speaks of the flood, and many cultures speak of the flood. And when you investigated it, you found absolutely no relevance to it. So You went into the different cultures that were, that have records that go back to that time frame, and a flood is not mentioned at all. And so what is the flood symbolic of?
Well, the true Noah's Ark is the Great Pyramid of Egypt. Now, when you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, it tells you that the Ark is pyramid-shaped. It is the Great Pyramid. Now, when you start looking at what is Noah, well, Noah relates to the seven. Now, the seven are the chakras. So Noah is the completion of the seven chakras, and that is why we have a rainbow above the Ark, because that relates to the colours of the seven chakras. So Noah is really that. So Noah's Ark is the Great Pyramid, which again is how the initiates purified and actually went through the different chakras. So when you start looking at the ancient texts, and you start looking at the ancient texts that have been found inside the likes of the Great Pyramid, Noah's Ark, you see that these sons of God realized that the sons of men were using technology that was to the detriment of the environment and to the planet. And what they did is they escaped on boats, and they took their domestic pets, they took their families with them, and they sailed to different parts of the world, which is why you have Stonehenge, Göbekli, all of these different places, is because that's where they disembarked from their boats and created sacred sites of information. Now, what these sons of God, these sons of men, materialistic lust for power races were doing, was creating environmental conditions that did actually create water to come down from the sky. That is now my understanding of what is related to with the flood. Now, as I say in the book, there's many races that were around during the time of the so-called biblical flood who were not affected by it. They didn't even mention it in their legacy. So it seemed to be a very, very concentrated area, which is what we now know as the likes of Egypt and places such as that. So that is my understanding of what the biblical flood is talking about. And again, the Bible mentions the fallen, the fallen angels coming down with the daughters of men and all this kind of thing, which correlates with this ancient Egyptian story of the sons of God and the sons of men and the grapple and the exchange of power on the planet. So that is now my understanding of what the flood really was. It wasn't as we believe it to be, the animals went in 2 by 2. That didn't happen. That couldn't happen. Noah's wooden boat, that didn't happen. It's the Great Pyramid, and it's the Great Pyramid which is the arcane knowledge, the arcane knowledge that is kept from the masses and is kept for the few. And that really now is my most updated understanding of what we are talking about in the flood, because again, as I said previously, everything that is now diluted as a Christian Bible comes from the oracle in stone, which is the Giza plateau.
Yeah, I think that most people don't realize that most of our biblical stories and fables and parables, all of it, come from Egypt. Egypt seems to have been the source of, or the inspiration to a lot of the writings that happened afterwards. And I think it's amazing that, especially the Great Pyramid, because I know that there are mentions that there are chambers beneath it. There are mentions that there are tunnels beneath it, and yet Egypt won't let anybody dig there for fear of destabilizing the Great Pyramid, which is, I believe, built on solid rock. So that doesn't make much sense to me. But it seems that there are whispers of wisdom that is out there that people are not allowing other people to find. I mean, the Hall of Records. The Hall of Records for me has always been inside us. It's not in a chamber someplace. But it seems that there is definitely a conspiracy to keep us uninformed, and yet, people like you and there are others out there that are bringing forward information that absolutely conflicts with the history we've been given to this point in time. And it makes one wonder, are the major religions afraid that they will lose their power and their influence, or can't they blend into it and become a part of a great awakening?
They certainly are frightened, because if you imagine that their foundations are built upon sand, which means that it's very, very rocky, it has no foundation really, and the winds of critical thought can sweep them away. So they are certainly scared of people understanding. If you wish to control people and wish to control their minds and control their bodies and control their life, the last thing that you need them to know is how sovereign and how powerful and how divine they are, because then you have no control over somebody who knows their own power. Now, when you look at, again, yes, the Bible is all Egyptian, and even down to Jesus came from the tribe of the Lion of Judah. Well, the Lion of Judah means lion, but that is the Sphinx of Egypt, which is really, the Sphinx of Egypt is, the riddle of the Sphinx is man. The riddle of the Sphinx is man's potential. And that is what the Sphinx is telling us now. The Pharaoh and the sons of God were symbolized by the lion. So that is why we have a giant lion, because that is who it represents. It represents the rulers of earth who ruled by knowledge and by wisdom. The builders of these sacred monuments, by the control of the forces of nature. So the Sphinx is really man's potential, and it tells you that is the riddle of the Sphinx. Now, when you look at the face, a face is really an outer expression of what is happening inside. So when you are transmuting inside, then that shows in the face. Now, in the face of the Sphinx, you have the lovely cobra head, which is really talking about the bright hood, the Robin Hood of folklore, but it is the bright hood, it is the illumination again of the mind. So when you look at the word conspiracy or the word aspire, spire, conspire, conspire means to breathe together. So we're now talking about the Holy Spirit. Now, when you go into the deep mystical meanings, when man understands the mysteries of God, then God breathes his spirit into those people. That is why the Sphinx has no nose, because he doesn't need a nose, because God is breathing in his spirit into the body. And so conspiracy is to breathe together, simply put. Now, when you look at my view on things, is there are two sides of silence, which is positive and negative. The negative side of silence is to remain silent, is to say nothing. The positive side of silence is to speak and to give people an alternative reality. And that is where I come from. Now, when I was at school and I was told by my teachers that Christopher Columbus found the Americas, well, Christopher Columbus did not find the Americas. It was the Sinclair family and the Knights Templars that have actually encrypted that in the architecture of Rosslyn Chapel 6 years before Columbus even set sail. When people tell me at school that Neil Armstrong was the first person on the moon, he wasn't, because there's Egyptian obelisks on the moon. So history is really a version of events that a group of people have said, this is what we want people to believe, this is the reality that we want people to understand. And when you actually say things that are against that reality, not only does it upset those people who want to keep it from you, but it also upsets the people who are plugged into the so-called matrix, which is the mind. Because now they have this information, they have to take responsibility of some kind. So, as I said, 20, 30 minutes ago, that sometimes my information has very few friends, but nevertheless, when I find evidence, then I report and produce that evidence. And that's exactly what I did in many courtrooms throughout the UK, in front of judges, in front of attorneys, in front of lots and lots of people who were grilling me for days because of the evidence that I'd found. But the evidence is the evidence. It speaks for itself.
Absolutely, and I think that's what's so wonderful about your material and what you put forth in your book, Alchemy of the Gods, because, it isn't just a philosophy that you pulled out of the air. It's a philosophy that is based on hardcore facts, so that it would seem to me that that they would be able to, well, let me put it this way, they probably understand it. Whether or not they acknowledge it or not is a whole nother story. But I think that what fascinated me I mean, so much of it, your book fascinated me, but one of the things that it fascinated me the most was your explanation of Jesus and how he really didn't exist, but he does exist in each and every one of us. And if you go into that would really be exciting.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Jesus really is symbolic of God in flesh, and God in flesh is really those of a divine consciousness, of a divine mind. Now, by that I mean they have a higher mind, they have a higher awareness, they realise that there's more beyond matter, there's more beyond humanity, there's more beyond earth, there's more beyond the horizon, the Elohim. There's more beyond all of these things. So Jesus really was God in flesh. Now, when you look at, people have accused me so many times of denying the existence of Christ and denying the existence of God. And what I've said to them is, I'm not denying the existence of anything. I'm just saying that it is different to what you've been told to believe. When you look at the creation, the universe, it can lead you to no other conclusion that it is a design. Now, any design has to have a designer, and that for me is God, even though I don't like the word God because that has sort of religious part of that, and I don't like that. But for want of a better phrase, then I use God. So Christ is really, in the English alphabet, is the QRST, which is hidden within the English alphabet. That is Christ. Now, when you look at Christ in Egyptian, it means burial. So when someone says to you Merry Christmas, they are really saying pyramid burial, is what they're really saying. So Christ, if you imagine anatomically, we have this Mother Mary, we have this feminine power, which is the serpent, which is called Kundalini. Now that Kundalini is at the base of Jacob's ladder, which is your spine. Now when that is activated, and there's certain ways in which to activate it, that serpent rises. It goes through the different chakras. The first two is Sodom and Gomorrah, which it destroys by fire, because it is a chemical fire, which is a spiritual fire, which is a higher vibrational fire than physical fire. This goes up your spine through your chakras, and it takes the solar energy from the solar plexus, and it is risen by the aisle of the spine. Now, aisle is the anointed. It is the anointed one. It takes it all up the body until it reaches, as I said before, the vault, which is really the tomb of this Christ seed. Now, it gets resurrected, and we have Easter within inside the mind. So Christ in essence is the God in flesh, and the God in flesh are the people who have awakened, who have gone through this Christ awakening. Every single one of us is Christ's potential. Every one of us is a sleeping Christ. Because when we awaken ourselves, we become the God in flesh. We become the Godhead. We become the God consciousness. We connect the Father to the Heavenly Father, which is the knowledge of the mind, to the knowledge of the universe. That is what Jesus is. Jesus was never an individual man that walked Nazareth or walked the Middle East. And the hierarchy of the church know that. But, when you have the likes of Pope Leo X saying it has served as well, this myth of Christ, they realize that because the whole foundation of the church is upon the resurrection of Jesus. Without the resurrection of Jesus, there is no church. So they will fight tooth and nail. They will fight tooth and nail to stop you realizing. When you look at the Shroud of Turin, that is most likely, by date, by description, Jacques de Molay, who was the Grand Master of the Knights Templar. So what the Vatican is not telling you, because they tell you that they have the authority from Christ through Saint Peter, Petros, the rock, the foundation upon which the church is built. But what they don't tell you is that the Knights Templar were the priests of the Temple of Yahweh, which is Jewish mysticism. And the Knights Templar, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar, had the key of this knowledge. So the Knights Templar were the foundations, or the foundation stone of the church, not St. Peter, not the Pope. So when they executed Jacques de Molay, they would have executed him in the way in which he denied that Christ was executed. Now, even the Vatican have said that the Shroud of Turin is not Christ, it is someone that reminds us of him. They are not going to tell you who the true identity is, because then they have to answer why they executed Jacques de Molay, and the answer to that is it changed the line of authority of this metaphor Christ. And in the new book that I'm bringing out, I actually go into the science of how you have oxygen, excited oxygen particles that would have created the photographic image of what is on the Shroud of Turin, and I go into the science of that. But in essence, there's a lot to hide, and Christ is the most famous character in the world. So to maintain this illusion, they have to maintain this character that is Christ. But I've found that it is not a walking person, it is the sleeping potential in each and every one of us.
That makes a lot of sense. In my philosophy, that we all have a seed of the infinite within us, which would be the unawakened Christ, which makes perfect sense. And that trying to evolve it, trying to expand it into a greater manifestation within our lives, you almost have to walk away from an organized religion into an understanding of the spirit within and its journey through time. And in awakening that consciousness allows you to become more aware of so much else there is. They talk about the different dimensions and stuff like that. And I think that ascends you into another dimension of understanding of a soul's journey. Your book is, what you do is you make people think, if this then that, and it does shift and change people's focus as to where they see the evolution of a spirit going. And what I love is you don't tell them where they're going, but you do tell them that with that awareness they can see a new direction, which is really quite profound.
It is, and it gives people that binary choice, the computer binary choice of you've been brought up saying there's just one direction, but now there's two, and it's your choice where you go. So when you look at creation, that is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The good and evil is the dualistic opposites. So when we split up, we become the good and evil. But when we become unified again, then we are permitted to eat from the apple of the tree of good and evil. So when you see the likes of the Apple logo, the Apple Corporation logo, and it has a bite mark out of it, that is telling you of the union of the two opposites of self, which then returns you to divinity, which returns you to the authority to eat from the tree of good and evil, knowledge of good and evil. And that again brings into things biblically. But we are all striving to become unionized. Now, when we get married physically, that is really the longing to find your complementary half. Because as I say, when we come here, there's always a manifest, a seen, but in simultaneous existence, there is always an unseen, unmanifest. And that is how duality has to work. That is how the universe works. When you look at what the creative force is, the creative force is nothing, and the creative force is everything in simultaneous existence. So in order for nothing to know everything, it has to experience in order to become nothing again, which contains everything. And the experience is the fragmented parts, which is divinity, which is each and every one of us. So we are all the embers of the original divine fire.
And once that divine fire reignites, where do we go?
Well, we can go back to different levels of the same journey. It's a continuous journey. We, as I say, we a lot of souls will go to different star systems because they are no longer compatible with the frequency of Earth. Even our DNA is compatible with the frequency of our planet of birth. So when we raise ourselves, when we no longer exist within the rules of the laws of matter, we are not compatible with Earth's resonance. So therefore, we go to different places to continue the journey at a higher frequency. That is what I said about many extraterrestrial races that are coming back to help us are advanced spiritual humans that have already gone through high school, which is Earth, and they're coming back to help us to graduate. So we go to different places to continue the journey, or we don't. So we move from here, and now if you imagine, again going back to what I said about, just imagine for one moment that Earth is a prison, and the only way that you are going to be paroled from prison is when you spiritually advance yourself. So if you never spiritually advance yourself, you are forever going to be recalled to prison. When you do spiritually advance yourself, you will get parole and you will leave.
Well, you spiritually advance and you then become one of the mystics, one of the guidance, whatever. Or are those master races, those mystics that are here to help us evolve, are they those that have, you mentioned that they reincarnate, but they have to start from scratch again. But, we don't escape this planet unless we are in spirit, because it's not our body that goes forward, it's our spirit that goes forward. So
that's correct. When you look at the biblical... Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, when you look at the biblical phrase, we come from dust, we return to dust. Dust in Hebrew, which is the primary language of the Bible, means light. So we come from light and we return to light. It is not talking about the dust as in the ground. So yes, the body is a temporary vehicle, but the true essence, the self, it leaves the body upon the physical, so-called physical death, when the physical body goes to the world below. So it is that spirit. Spirit means breath. It is that the breath of God being inhaled, being taken back. When that spirit of God exhales, we then get life again. So it is the spirit that continues the journey, but it is a consciousness that remembers its experiences, and it takes those experiences with it, almost like the suitcase when you're going on vacation. It is the various experiences that it has a recollection of, and it is the spirit, it is the essence, which some people call soul, that moves on when the physical body expires.
So, but what I think now my opinion, my thought at this moment in time is that, we can certainly do astral travel so that we can leave the body and we can go other places on the earth plane. And my thought is that when portals are crossed, it's the spirit that crosses, not the physicality. So it makes sense to me that when these teachers, these ascended masters, whatever you want to call them, come into the earth plane to help to sort of nudge consciousness a little further, are these those masters of old, or are these new masters of old? Or, who are these ancient wise people that seem to come in from time to time to help us to evolve and move our consciousness forward?
Well, they are the advanced spiritual humans of old, the likes of the sons of God that have created a genetic link to enable them to do that. And when they come back into a physical reality, they have to remember, they have to re-emerge with what they knew, their former self. So yes, it is the spirit that transitions between the portals, between the dimensions. It is a physical body that is within this third dimension. You can travel dimensions, you can travel time, remote viewing consciously. I've personally done that myself. But it is the ancients, the likes of the sons of God, who are the wisdom keepers of old, that have decided and have chosen to come back at various points in history, even now, in order to re-emerge with the ancient knowledge that they once knew, for it to be revealed through into this world now. And that is what has happened. And many people who are now doing this and passing this kind of message and saying these kind of things and re-emerging ancient knowledge, which was, as I said, was timed predominantly for now, that is what they are doing. They have come back to help, and they have come back to try and take humanity by the hand, and they're trying to remove humanity from basically the prison of ignorance. So when Christ cures the blind, the blind is ignorance.
Well, so that would suggest that there are physically on the Earth plane at this time some of these entities, but they don't walk around with sandals and long white sheets and proclaim themselves. They are subtly putting information out there as is appropriate to the time frame. They're in, I think it was Philip Lindsay's book, that there was going to be a gathering at some point, the Gobi Desert, thousands and thousands and maybe millions of years ago, was the center for spirituality on the planet, according to him. And that in 2024 there is going to be another convergence on the Gobi Desert of these highly enlightened beings to take a look at humanity and see where we are and where we're going. Do you have any knowledge of that, or is that just somebody else's thought?
There are certainly, should we say, galactic councils as such that do measure, shall we say, the advancement or not of humanity. I mean, it's quite clear that there are many people now within our race that are starting to get this. There are many people within our race that are starting to expand and broaden their minds to accept the greater knowledge. There are still too many that are not. But the same with anything, when you want to measure how fast your child is growing in height, then you put a measuring meter thing on the wall, and you say, this week you are 4'12", next week, you are 5'2", and that is how you basically measure the height progression. But that is the same in consciousness. And my opinion is that the meter, the measurement of the meter, the consciousness material, is how they are measuring the consciousness of humanity. And of course, there's a lot of eyes on us now. So in terms of would there be gatherings to see how far we've got? Yes, of course. All parents want to see how their children are developing, and that is what is happening. And they will have meetings at certain point in history to say, are they getting it? Are they not getting it? And bearing in mind that a lot of people who have come back now, or a lot of souls, a lot of self-essence that have come back to help in these times, when you get to the likes of dream states and meditation states, you are actually sending information back to them anyway. And if so, you are reporting back, shall we say, to the boss, and that is another part of people coming here as a soul, coming into a physical body, but then remembering or having triggers, setting off triggers, and looking back at my awakening, it was clearly a trigger. It was clearly an alarm clock. So when you do that, you set an alarm clock for yourself to remember, and it's when you remember that you then start to activate the knowledge of old, and you start to pass that knowledge on. But of course, as I say, you are also reporting back. And so that there's lots of information going about to and fro, because it is quite clear that humanity as a race is thousands of years behind its intended original timeline, and that has to change.
Well, I know that the soldier that touched the hovercraft or whatever it was in Rendlesham Forest, part of the message that he got in the binary code was that actually the drone, because it was probably a drone of some type that had come through a portal or whatever, but the part of the message was that it was for 800 years in the future, which gives me hope, because it means, well, maybe that humanity is not really on a trek for self-destruction, though the times do seem to infer that that could possibly happen. And it just, go ahead.
No, the future really is when you're able to see cause and effect simultaneously. So technically, the future is still to be written, although you can have a roundabout guess at what's going to happen if you stop on this particular path. You can say, well, if you stop on this particular path, then this is likely to happen. But in terms of what the things that I found inside the Great Pyramid would suggest that all indicates the re-emergence of the advanced human, shall we say, rulership again. And so that doesn't suggest that the world is going to end. It does mean that it's going to change. And of course, you know, people are going to experience this change in different ways. And what I am noticing is a complete division, complete schism between those who are getting it and those who are not. And that to me is kind of going into the Egyptian writings that the seventh generation of knowledge bearers will take over from the sixth, who are the fallen. So that suggests that we do continue, although, you know, there will be change, but there will be the wise ones who will rule again one day.
Yeah, I would, you know, totally agree with you on that. It's just, you look at the state of the world at this moment in time, and it's frightening. And you think, holy mackerel, are we going to wipe ourselves out, or are we going to do something that will certainly cull the population down to a very few? And if that happens, are they going to be the ones that are already in control, or is a kinder, gentler, more compassionate race going to evolve from it? And if we are indeed on the Earth a prison planet, and the only way out is through this kind of ascension of spirit and consciousness, then basically is the Earth going to remain a prison planet for spirits who are working through all of this process?
I would say yes, because they have to have some kind of springboard in which to project, and the divine plan really is the re-emergence of divine knowledge, and the beings that will take that divine knowledge forward are already here. They're already in different frequencies. You know, there's many different realities around us in different frequencies. There's many different, should we say, advanced beings here now in the skies and walking the planet who are already here. There's many people now who are having these kind of conversations, who are passing this information on to humanity, who are preparing them for it. So the tools and the facets that are needed for that gigantic leap forward are already here in place. But you have to, it's quite clear that unless something absolutely wondrous, some miracle happens on a large scale, that not all humanity are going to get this at the same time. So you have to have some kind of safety net in which to allow them to shall we say, ferment and to elevate themselves again. And sometimes that may take another several lives, reincarnations, to do that, to reactivate. But you can also have planets and realities in the same place, but within different frequencies. So it could be even a case where some are in a different reality. I mean, reality really is just a construct of the mind. And
Right.
there is a possibility where the construct of people's minds who do get it just form a different reality, and they exist within a different reality. You're just not privy, or just not a part. You know, when they say of the earth, you know, on the earth nor of it, kind of thing, where you can have different doorways, different corridors, different houses. You know, my father's house has many rooms, and you can exist in a different reality. You don't have to move planets, but you can exist in the same space, but on different frequencies. But the divine plan overall is to advance humanity. That was always the grand divine plan, because we are not where we should be.
No, I've often told people that we create our reality by our perception of it. And I've been accused of being a Pollyanna because I am at peace and you know, content and blissful, a lot more than probably a lot of other people. And I think it's how you feel and how you see things, and how you can see a better way, or you can see a better thing, or you can see a better answer. And sometimes people aren't open to that, and that's okay. I think that you're right. I do believe there are ascended masters here on the planet at this particular point in time, and I don't think they have labels, and I don't think they're doing workshops, and I don't think they're. I think ascended masters are people who are gently and kindly touching and helping others evolve by being spiritually in their presence and sharing their wisdom, not standing in a pulpit or on a soapbox in a park, but they're people who are radiating such an amazing energy that people are drawn to them. They don't know why, and they are triggered by being in the presence of something they don't understand. Does that make sense?
It does. Again, when you look at, you know, the only labels that they have are the ones that we attach to them. When you look at, you know, do these masters want followers? No, of course they don't, because it takes the spotlight off the information that, you know, it takes the spotlight off the information that they are putting forward to this race. No, so no, of course. And in relation to reality, you know, it is a construct of the mind. If you imagine that everything that the eyes see is upside down, it is the brain that puts it the right way around. So it is the brain that makes everything look the way it thinks it should be. When you look at the five senses, the five wounds of Christ, which is really, you know, the prison of material, then our five senses take information from universal waves, it passes it to the brain, and then the brain interprets that and creates a familiar world, largely from memory. So reality itself is not what we think it is. You know, when we look at something that we think is a far-off star, then that's really on the surface of the retina of the eye. So does that mean that there's no such thing as distance? So in terms of reality, this is not reality. This is a construct of the mind, what we believe to be reality. And a lot of the geometric shapes that we see on automobiles, on clothing line logos, on architecture, goes into the subconscious to create should we say, an accepted reality. And when you have an accepted reality, most people accept that is the way it is, but it's a projection. It is not real reality. So I'm totally with you, and regardless of what people say verbally or wherever to try and diminish your opinion on that, then I would go with you are right and they're not.
Well, and the thing is, sometimes people just can't hear the truth because they're not ready to deal with it. And, you know, there's nothing you can do. But I think that you have put forth some fascinating material here that could certainly put a chink in the armor of some of the perceptions that a lot of people have. I think that from what I gathered from the book, that that, we all have access to so much wisdom and knowledge, and it's a matter of being ready to accept that wisdom and knowledge may not go along with what has been taught them and hammered into them from the beginning of their lives.
That's right, and again, there's nothing that any one person does that everyone else can't do, because no one is no one is this individual special person that has all the keys and all the secrets, and only they have them. So everything that I do, everything that everybody else does, everyone beyond that can do the same things. And the one thing I learned the hard way is never do battle with ignorance. If people don't have the eyes to see and the ears if they don't have the eyes to see or the ears to hear at that time, then move on and concentrate on the people who do. Because otherwise you're just going to have this, you're just going to be locking horns for days and days and days and not get anywhere. If they're not ready, just don't battle with ignorance, and just move on and serve and help the people who are ready.
That's great advice. I think a lot of times, people who are close to us, it's not that they don't have to have the same opinion. It's a matter of talking about the potentiality of a difference. And once but what I find fascinating is that quite often, just in talking, even though they're not accepting, you plant a seed, and sooner or later the seed grows, and it may not even be in this lifetime. But I've heard from people from 30 years ago that say I said something that at the time they thought I was crazy, and now they decided I wasn't crazy. So, there's hope. But,
and I've had the exact same thing, and you can never undo what you've heard. So at some level, you as you quite rightly say, you have planted that seed. Again, people are entitled to believe whatever they wish to believe, but it is my passion, it is my belief that they deserve to have an alternative view, and when they have that alternative view, then they can decide. But really, the alternative view, when you look at it, it is quite evidenced. It's quite evidentially clear that is the correct road.
Well, I think that with a lot of your material, you have based it on actual facts, so that it's hard to argue it. But in many ways, you're a spiritual Johnny Appleseed. You're scattering the seeds, and you're hoping that they take root in places, and I'm sure they will. And then in other places, maybe not so much. But it's planting those seeds. That's the hardest thing for me sometimes, to give out what I feel is a truism, and it's planting a seed. And it's not our responsibility to water it, fertilize it, nurture it. It's the responsibility of the person who gets the seed, whether or not they're going to allow it to grow within them. And I'm not saying that I have all the answers, because I don't have any of them probably, but it's giving out what is your truth and letting people try it on and see if it fits, and do that without hammering it down their throats. And I have, in my family, I have people who are fundamental Christians who are absolutely against most of the material that I get into, and yet we live and love together, and we don't talk about certain topics because we know we're going to butt heads. And I think that's, with this material, that's exactly what you've got. You've got people out there who are going to buy this book and think it will trigger something in their consciousness, and they'll go, never thought of it that way, but that's a possibility, and let me work with it. And then there are others that will put it down and say it's a good book weight, so but I think but the material is so valuable to look into, to try on, to see if it fits you, and it's and so your new book is on who built the pyramids. Are you going to go into the root race that did it, or are you going to go into another direction with it?
Well, no, I mean, who built the pyramids will really certainly in my view, with the evidence that I've found, will actually solve the mystery once and for all as to who built them, how they built them, why they built them, not only the pyramids but all the monoliths and monuments around the world and how they did that. It also, I do reveal for the first time who I am personally and why I'm into this. And that will be the first time that I've ever disclosed that kind of information as to what my role is in all of this. So really, who built the pyramid goes into just that. It goes into the races that did it, why they did it, how they did it. And really, when I do research, and it's quite deep and it's quite wide, and there's a lot of information that comes to me as a download from other places. And in all the years that I've been looking and going through things, I've never found anybody else anywhere that is saying the same things that will be in Who Built the Pyramids. It's a unique angle, it's a unique view, and it really does answer the question once and for all. And it answers it in a deep, but in a sensible, logical way. And that really, my style of writing comes from presenting evidence and just getting to the point and saying, this is the evidence, you be the jury, you either believe that evidence or you don't, but this is the evidence. And so the book goes into a very, very deep, logical, reasonable, sensible, adult view of the information that the ancients have left us, and it explains my view, certainly the information that I've come across, taking you my journey from childhood to now, and answering why it is me that is presenting that information to you.
I know you've dealt a lot with Egypt, and I totally agree that the foundation of much of what we've got out there does come from ancient Egypt, but you didn't really mention a lot of the South American, the Teotihuacan and the Pumapunka. I mean, are those just right along with the Great Pyramid, or is that another phase of development?
It is all the same instruments of a gigantic orchestra. So if you imagine, you see the orchestra and you have the conductor, which is the Great Pyramid. You have the different shapes, the different material of instruments, the wood section, the brass section, the percussion, etc. So all of these ancient monuments, are, putting it in simple terms, are different instruments of the same orchestra. So when you look at the likes of all the pyramids around the world and beyond Earth, it is the same meaning, it is the same reason, it is the same usage, the same purpose. But on the other hand, you then have different versions of that purpose in a different shape, in a circular of stones or something else. But nevertheless, it is all part of the same thing. And again, I do say again in the new book that it is all different instruments of the same orchestra, and that includes every single monument and monolith that we found and those that we haven't.
And there are a lot that we haven't. Did you go in any depth into the Antarctic and what is possibly there once the ice melts?
Well, again, you have certain entrances into inner Earth, which again the ancient Egyptians spoke about as there being races of people within the Earth and on other planets as well. So you certainly have entrances into them, and those are the kinds of things that are being guarded, and there are reports of military battles on these locations. So Antarctica and different places are literally, should we say, gateways to inner Earth, and that is what is being covered up, that is what is being guarded.
It's just, and does inner Earth have the same journey that those people in inner Earth, do they have the same journey that those do on the surface, or is theirs a different journey?
Well, there is a different sort of level of the same journey. When you look at some of the real sort of famous ancient civilizations that have just mysteriously disappeared, some of them have gone into inner Earth, and some of them are still existing on upper Earth, but they are on a different frequency, so we can't see them. Now, if you develop to your mind to a certain spiritual maturity, then you'll be able to interact and see them again. But a lot of them went into inner earth to continue that particular journey at a different frequency level, and that was their choice to do that. At some point, it is said that they may re-emerge again.
Wow. I wouldn't do it today for sure. It's not a good climate to come into these days. I think that what you've got here is such a fascinating take on the symbology and the interpretation of, I mean, even from the Bible, from Jesus and Moses and Noah and the Ark. I mean, all of it makes great sense, and part of it, and especially the Exodus, it makes sense that there hasn't been any archaeological evidence of a lot of this, and if it is symbolic of a level of consciousness, that would be one explanation for why there is no archaeological evidence of a lot of these things.
That's right, and that's because physically they didn't happen. And when you look at mystics, they tap into universal knowledge, and therefore they understand things in a unique way. And I've tapped into the minds of the mystics. So when you look at the Exodus, when you look at Moses, which I've said comes out of the word Kehamet, which is Egypt, born from Egypt. But in mystic circles, in Gnostic circles, the transition from Genesis to Revelation, which is the genitals, to the Promised Land, which is the mind, the enlightened mind, takes a path of least resistance. That path of least resistance is known as the open sea. So that really is symbolically, the parting of the Red Sea by Moses is symbolic of the open sea, the path of least resistance from captivity, the base chakras, the root chakras, to the crown chakra, to the illuminated mind, and that can take a path of least resistance, which is figuratively the parting of the Red Sea of Moses. Now, when you get to the burning bush is the illuminated mind. It is the fornix, which means furnace, which is inside the mind, which is all to do with the vault, which is all to do with the burial place of your Christ. So again, the Moses story, the same with all the others really, is talking about a different level of consciousness, an advancement of consciousness, and to basically offer yourself, your personal self, this inner ascension, because everything that we see outside of us is really a projection of the projector, which is ourself.
So the writers of the Bible had to then be ascended masters putting this into code in order to preserve it through time.
Well, the writers of such sacred books were the mystics, the Gnostics, that was of a master conscious level. Master simply means measurer of stars, so they go into astronomy and astrology, but nevertheless they were able to transport hidden secret information through a symbolic language, and that is what we have in the likes of these sacred books. If you imagine that you're on the battleship above the surface and you become aware of the presence of a submarine and you want to release your depth charges to hit the submarine, you have to get to the correct depth in order to find it. And that is the exact same as these sacred books. You have to get to the correct depth in order to find the submarine, which in this case is the vessel of sacred knowledge. But they were able to encrypt it in Hebrew, in Greek, and in English, which is the three coded languages of these sacred books. And they managed to do it to such an extent that people now see the stories that hide the submarine as the absolute reality, as an absolute truth, as nothing else could be possible. And that again is part of the going into deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into matter, because they've come so far from the shore that they no longer believe that there is a shore. And that is what has happened. But for those who can understand, you can see a totally different interpretation and a totally different message. And it is that different message that to me is absolutely fascinating it fills me with enthusiasm, which really means the fire of the gods. And it stokes the fire in order for me to continue to go forward and try to get to the bottom. Every single day I want to know more than the previous day. And that is what keeps the stone ball rolling. And that for me is what I wish to do and will continue to do.
Well, it seems that this material was written 1,000 to 2,000 years ago. Possibly they were thinking that humanity would be a little faster on the uptake in order to understand and utilize this information. I mean, it's fascinating, and I am so glad that you did this book and that you spent close to 2 hours with us, going over it, because it's so important that it's another option for people. And, the more options you can get, the more clear you can get as to what it is you need in your life at this particular point in time. We are getting down to the last little bit here. Is there any information that you want to get out there about what you're doing or places you're going to be or your website, information like that you want to get out there?
Yeah, thank you. I think my website is michael-feeley.com, and that's Feeley. What I have planned is the likes of church and cathedral tours to take people around and actually point out this secret information within churches and cathedrals, which largely I've been given permission to do. Also on the card is potentially my own TV show where each week I will take a specific piece of this information and then go really in depth into that particular piece, and that will be a weekly show which is coming, I hope, in the next several months. And as I say, there's the new book called Who Built the Pyramids, which came to me in a flash of inspiration. And since that flash of inspiration 10 to 14 days ago, it is now over 100,000 words in, so it's not too far off being completed. So that
yeah.
When it comes, and it certainly did. So that's really what's in the pipeline in the immediate.
Well, I want to thank you so very, very much for being with me today and for taking the time to share with our listeners your insight and your information. It's just been fascinating, and I am so appreciative of all of your work. And after the show, we will book you for December so we can talk about your new book. Thank you so much for being with us today. I so greatly appreciate your time and your energy and your information.
No, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure. I love speaking about these subjects. So thank you again for inviting me here.
Oh, my pleasure, totally. And I want to thank everybody for listening. I do appreciate your time and your energy as well. Please make sure you listen tomorrow night to Mark's show. And this will be up on YouTube later on today. And please check it out. If it resonates with you, please share it with your friends, because it is fascinating information. So for now, bye-bye. Stay well and stay happy and stay joyful.